The twinkling Christmas lights lining Manhattan Avenue couldn't quite chase away the biting chill of winter. Inside the towering glass skyscraper, the lavish party buzzed with laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. Ethan Reeves, impeccably dressed in a flawless suit, leaned against the corner of the room, his sharp gaze sweeping across the crowd. He exuded the familiar arrogance of a young, successful businessman, but deep within, there was an inexplicable emptiness. Another year was coming to an end, yet every triumph he had achieved felt hollow. Trophies without meaning, victories without soul. Amid the festive atmosphere, a man with a sly smirk approached Ethan. Carter Hayes, a so-called friend but a hidden rival, had an uncanny knack for catching Ethan off guard. Holding a glass of wine with a provocative glint in his eyes, Carter leaned in and whispered, "This Christmas, do you dare to do something different, Ethan? Or is it just going to be the same dry business deals as always?" Ethan gave a faint smirk, feigning indifference, but Carter's words made him pause. Carter knew exactly how to ignite Ethan's competitive streak, the very trait that had propelled him to the top of his career. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his tone edged with challenge. Carter chuckled lightly, gesturing toward the stage where a young woman was speaking. Under the soft glow of chandeliers, she stood out with a confident strength that was unlike anyone Ethan had ever encountered. Amelia Brooks, a social activist, was addressing the crowd about a charitable program supporting families affected by economic inequality. Her warm, resonant voice and radiant determination seemed to quiet the entire room. "She's not your type, is she?" Carter continued with a smirk. "Here's the bet. Marry her for 6 months. Let's see if you can win her over." Ethan chuckled, masking a rare flicker of unease. "Marriage? You're joking, right? For what reason?" Carter took a slow sip of his wine before answering deliberately. "Because I know you can't do it. Amelia isn't the kind of woman swayed by money or power. But if you manage to pull it off, I'll fully fund your Central Avenue project." Carter's words made Ethan freeze. Central Avenue was his most critical project of the year, but it was dangerously underfunded. Ethan glanced at Amelia once more. There was something in her gaze, confidence mixed with an unyielding resolve, that made her intriguingly unpredictable. She wasn't the kind to be easily conquered, and that made her all the more captivating. "All right, Carter, I accept your challenge," Ethan said, his voice icy but laced with determination. As the bet was accepted, the party seemed to grow even livelier. But within Ethan was a swirl of anticipation and curiosity. He wondered if Amelia was truly as exceptional as Carter claimed, or if this was just another game for him to conquer. Meanwhile, Amelia's glance swept briefly yet sharply across the room, her eyes landing on Ethan as if she had already deciphered his thoughts. From another corner, Carter smirked quietly to himself. He knew this bet was more than just a source of amusement. It was a way to challenge Ethan, the man who always believed he could control everything. But this time, Carter was certain things would not go as smoothly as Ethan expected. Snow had begun to fall, the delicate flakes settling gently on Ethan's dark hair as he stepped into the old cathedral, hosting the season's largest Christmas charity event. The glow of flickering candles mingled with the echoes of a choir's hymn, creating a sacred yet strangely comforting atmosphere. Ethan paused, momentarily taken aback, the chill in his heart seemingly eased by the scene before him. But it wasn't the candles or the music that truly stopped him. It was the woman on the stage. Her gentle smile and eyes alight with unshakable conviction struck a chord he couldn't quite name. Once again, Amelia Brooks was the one who made him feel something different, something he couldn't yet comprehend. The charity event was held in an old cathedral, lavishly decorated for Christmas with a towering tree, adorned with colorful lights and green wreaths draped along the walls. Ethan entered with his signature composed and aloof demeanor. Accustomed to grand, opulent parties, he found himself momentarily unsettled by this setting. This wasn't his usual environment, nor the kind of event he typically attended. On stage, Amelia was speaking, her voice warm yet resolute. She spoke of the struggles faced by working-class families during the holidays, of the heartbreak many endured when unable to provide their children with a proper Christmas. Each word she uttered felt like a gentle needle, pricking the hearts of her audience. But for Ethan, her words brought something else, an unshakable unease. It wasn't the stories of hardship that left him unsettled, but the way Amelia's eyes seemed to pierce straight into his soul, brimming with emotions he wasn't prepared to confront. After the speech, Carter introduced Ethan to Amelia. She looked at him with a gaze that was curious, but far from impressed. Shaking his hand, she offered a polite smile. "So, you're a friend of Carter's. I've heard you're quite the successful businessman." Ethan smirked faintly, his usual sharp-eyed confidence on full display. "And I've heard you're someone who turns tragic stories into meaningful actions. Quite a rare talent." Amelia raised an eyebrow slightly, as if she had already anticipated his attitude. "I'm just trying to do the right thing," she replied, her voice calm yet firm. Throughout the evening, Ethan observed Amelia from a distance. She was unlike any woman he had ever encountered. She didn't flaunt herself, didn't try to impress, and seemed utterly indifferent to his presence. Instead, Amelia spent her time engaging with the attendees, asking thoughtful questions, sharing stories, and even wrapping small gifts by hand for underprivileged children. Ethan found it perplexing and a bit unsettling. This was the first time he had met someone entirely unfazed by his wealth or influence. "She's not easily swayed," Carter murmured with a mocking chuckle. "Are you sure you still want to go through with this?" Ethan smirked in response, but deep down, he felt a strange and indescribable sensation. For the first time, he found himself genuinely curious about someone. Amelia, with her gentle smile and unwavering resolve, made him feel like he was facing something he couldn't control, and that intrigued him even more. As the evening came to a close, Amelia left with the group of volunteers, leaving no trace of herself with Ethan except for one final glance. Calm and composed, yet unmistakably proud. For Ethan, that look felt like a challenge, igniting a desire to know more about this enigmatic woman. Carter patted Ethan on the shoulder, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well, not so easy, is it?" Ethan didn't reply, his eyes fixed on Amelia's figure as she disappeared into the glow of the streetlights. Inside, an unfamiliar sensation stirred, a mix of intrigue and a faint apprehension about what might come next. The Christmas lights still shimmered brightly across the streets, but inside Ethan's luxurious penthouse, the atmosphere was as cold as ice. Sitting on an expensive leather sofa, Ethan stared out at the glittering cityscape, his sharp gaze betraying the storm within. A conflict brewed in his mind. Part of him was eager to complete the challenge, treating it like another game to win, while another part was haunted by the memory of Amelia's unwavering eyes. He couldn't stop wondering, why would a woman like her agree to step into this game? Or did she have her own hidden motives, ones he had yet to uncover? Ethan and Amelia's next meeting didn't take place in the warm ambiance of a church or a lavish party, but in a small cafe in Brooklyn, a place Amelia had chosen to avoid attention. Ethan, dressed impeccably yet feeling slightly awkward, stepped inside and couldn't help but feel out of place amidst the simplicity of the setting. Amelia sat in a corner, holding an old book. As Ethan approached, she looked up, her gaze steady and unflinching. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with quiet resolve. Ethan sat across from her, feeling as though her eyes were assessing him, weighing every detail. "I want to discuss my proposal, marriage. I know it sounds unusual, but I believe we can turn this into something mutually beneficial." Amelia let out a small laugh, but it wasn't the warm smile he'd seen before. Instead, it was a cold, faintly mocking chuckle. "Mutually beneficial? And what exactly do you mean by that? I'm not the kind of person who needs help from a sham marriage. Ethan could feel the challenge in her tone, but rather than back down, he met her gaze with unwavering determination. I can support your charity work, not just for 6 months, but beyond that, if you agree. Amelia held his gaze, her expression unreadable. Finally, she placed her book down and spoke slowly. I'll agree, but on one condition. I won't be a puppet in your plans, and I reserve the right to leave whenever I feel there's no reason to stay. The wedding took place in a simple ceremony. No flowers, no music. The two walked into the church with only a few witnesses present, and their vows were exchanged in a silence so profound it bordered on solemn. Amelia wore a plain white dress, far from the glamorous image Ethan had always associated with a bride. Yet, her simplicity made her stand out, like someone who belonged to an entirely different world than his polished, opulent one. Back at the penthouse, Amelia stood by the large window, gazing down at the city glittering with Christmas lights. Ethan entered the room, holding a glass of wine, his eyes quietly observing her from a distance. Interesting, isn't it? Amelia said, her voice calm as she continued to look out the window. A marriage where both people know it's nothing but an act. What do you think about that, Ethan? Ethan took a sip of his wine, feeling a flicker of discomfort at her question. I think we're doing what's necessary, and if it benefits us both, why not? Amelia turned to face him, her expression devoid of anger but carrying a calmness that was almost unnerving. I hope you stick to your word, because I have no intention of changing my life for you. As time passed, Amelia stayed true to her promise. She refused to let herself be drawn into the luxurious comforts that Ethan's world provided. Instead, she continued to dedicate herself to charity events, using the opportunities this marriage offered to expand the reach of her community projects. This unsettled Ethan. He was accustomed to controlling everything and everyone around him, but Amelia left no room for manipulation. Her every word and action felt like a mirror reflecting his own insecurities, making him feel scrutinized in a way he had never experienced before. One evening, under the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights in the living room, Ethan broke the silence. Don't you think you should make more of an effort to get along, Amelia? We are married, even if it's just for appearances. Amelia took a slow sip of her tea, her sharp gaze locking onto his. Get along. Ethan, I'm not here to be a supporting character in your life. I have my own reasons for being here, and if my presence makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should ask yourself why. Amelia's words left Ethan silent. For the first time, he felt himself being put on the defensive. Throughout his life, he had always been the one in control, but Amelia was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Her independence and resilience unsettled him, yet they also intrigued him in ways he couldn't fully understand. Deep down, Ethan began to realize something he hadn't anticipated. Amelia was no longer just a part of the wager. She was becoming someone who forced him to confront himself, to question the man he had always thought he was. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the living room, their reflections dancing on the large glass windows of the penthouse. But within Ethan, there was a darkness, an emptiness he couldn't put into words. Across the room, Amelia sat quietly at the table, writing on sheets of worn paper. She maintained her usual calm demeanor, but tonight, her gaze held a hint of introspection. Ethan watched her from a distance, his heart unexpectedly quickening as he realized her presence in his life was no longer just part of a game. Yet, the longer he looked at her, the more he felt the weight of an unanswered question, a secret Amelia had kept hidden, one that he couldn't quite uncover. This marriage of convenience was becoming increasingly complicated for Ethan. Amelia was unlike any of the women he'd known before. She didn't ask about his projects, showed no interest in his wealth, and seemed utterly indifferent to the whispers in high society about their unconventional union. She was an enigma, one that both intrigued and unnerved him. One cold afternoon while working in his study, Ethan overheard a phone call Amelia was having in the adjacent room. Her usually confident voice carried an uncharacteristic quiver of emotion. "I can't forgive, but I need to keep going. His project is advancing too quickly. If we don't stop it, more families will end up like ours." Ethan froze, the words sending a wave of confusion and doubt crashing over him. What project? What families? He felt as if he had been thrust into a battle he didn't even know existed, and the pieces of the puzzle were just beginning to fall into place. That evening, under the dim glow of the living room lights, Ethan made the decision to confront Amelia. She was sitting by the window, her gaze distant as she watched the streets below, alive with the glow of Christmas lights. "Amelia?" Ethan began, his voice deeper than usual. "I need to know the truth. Why did you agree to marry me?" Amelia turned to face him, her calm expression replaced by one filled with deep, unspoken pain. She sighed, placing her teacup on the table, and spoke slowly, her voice heavy with emotion. "Because of my parents." Her answer startled Ethan. "Your parents? What do you mean?" Amelia began to explain, her tone somber, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. "Years ago, my parents owned a small business. It was everything they had, everything they poured their lives into building. But it was destroyed, crushed by a major real estate project led by Reeves Corporation. My father fought to save it, but every effort failed. They lost everything, and after that, my father couldn't bear the pressure. He took his own life." Her words struck Ethan like a hammer, leaving him momentarily speechless. Amelia's words hit Ethan like a freezing wind, leaving him utterly paralyzed. His chest tightened, not from her accusations, but from the weight of a pain he never realized he had caused. He sat in silence, memories flooding back of the countless real estate projects he had led. To him, they were just numbers, contracts, deals to be closed. But to others, they were lives, fragile and irreplaceable. "I didn't know," Ethan stammered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know that happened." Amelia's gaze locked onto his, sharp and unyielding like a blade. "No, you didn't know. And that's the problem, Ethan. You never cared about anyone but yourself." Ethan bowed his head, guilt rising like a tide within him. Yet, deep down, another part of him wanted to push back, to explain that he never intended for this to happen. But no words came, only the heavy silence of regret. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the penthouse grew heavier than ever. Amelia spoke little, but her silence felt like a punishment to Ethan. He couldn't stop thinking about her story and the consequences he had never allowed himself to face. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, lit by the soft glow of the Christmas tree, Ethan suddenly broke the silence. "I want to make things right. I don't know where to start, but I want to try." Amelia set her fork and knife down, her eyes flashing briefly with surprise before settling into a gaze of guarded skepticism. "Do you think wanting to fix things is enough? What you've done can't be undone with just words." Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I know, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. I don't just want to fix things for you. I want to fix them for myself. For the first time in my life, I want to do what's right." Amelia didn't respond immediately. She studied him for a long moment, as if searching for a sincerity she had never seen in him before. For the first time, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a hint of consideration. That night, as Ethan stood by the window, gazing down at the city below, he realized his life was changing in ways he had never imagined. Amelia was no longer just a part of some foolish bet. She had become the one person who made him want to start over, to become better. In the shimmering glow of the Christmas lights that illuminated the cityscape, Ethan made a decision. He would no longer let his past define who he was. For the first time, he resolved to take control of his future, not for his own gain, but for something greater, something meaningful. Snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the streets leading to the small neighborhood where Amelia often spent her time. Ethan stood beneath the warm yellow glow of a local cafe's lights, his hand trembling slightly as he gripped a small gift bag. The biting wind stung his face, but it couldn't match the nervous tension churning inside him. He was a man used to controlling everything, yet now he stood at a door that led not only to Amelia, but to a part of his past he desperately wanted to make right. Deep down, he feared that no effort, no gesture, would ever be enough to ease the pain she had endured because of him. After Amelia's revelations, Ethan decided it was time to act. He began with small yet meaningful gestures. One early morning, Amelia received news of a substantial donation made to her charity. She didn't need to ask who it came from. She already knew. When Amelia confronted Ethan, he was direct. "I didn't do this to buy your forgiveness. I want to help, and this is just the beginning." Amelia looked at him, her gaze a mix of skepticism and a faint trace of emotion. "Do you think money can fix everything?" Ethan gave a small smile, one that carried none of his usual arrogance. "I don't think money can change everything, but I believe actions can. And I'm trying." Amelia didn't fully forgive Ethan, but she couldn't refuse when he offered to join her in some of her charitable activities, from distributing Christmas gifts to children in underprivileged neighborhoods, to helping restore an old community center. Ethan began to experience moments he never would have imagined for himself. At one gift-giving event, Ethan stood quietly beside Amelia, watching as she spoke warmly to a group of children. A young girl tugged at Amelia's coat and whispered, "Who is he? Is he your husband?" Amelia hesitated, her eyes briefly meeting Ethan's, before she answered softly, "He's a friend who's helping us, sweetheart." Her words, seemingly simple, left Ethan with an odd sense of emptiness. He didn't want to just be a friend helping out. He wanted her to see him differently, to acknowledge him in a way that mattered. But deep down, he understood that it would take time. Time, and actions that spoke louder than words. Gradually, Ethan's actions ceased to be solely about redemption. He began to genuinely feel the significance of what he was doing. Standing in the old community center, watching local residents come together to decorate for Christmas, hanging stockings over the fireplace and stringing garlands, Ethan felt a joy unlike anything he had ever known. It wasn't the joy of victory or power, but the simple, profound happiness that came from connection, from bringing something good into others' lives. Amelia observed this transformation, a feeling she couldn't quite name stirring within her. Ethan was no longer the arrogant man she had once despised. He wasn't just trying for her sake anymore. He was doing it for himself. But even as she saw this change, a question lingered in her mind. Was it enough for her to believe he was truly deserving of forgiveness? On Christmas Eve, Ethan decided to give Amelia a special gift. He brought her to a small house in the outskirts of the city, its windows glowing warmly with golden light. When they stepped inside, Amelia was stunned to see that it was a newly established community center, dedicated to the families who had been affected by Ethan's past real estate projects. "I've destroyed so much," Ethan said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I want to start making things right. I've named this place the House of Light, as a reminder that hope can exist, even in the darkest times." Amelia was speechless. Tears streamed down her face, not just because of the gift itself, but because she saw in Ethan a man who had truly changed. Yet the old wounds were still there, and she knew she needed more time. Time to heal, and time to decide if forgiveness was possible. As they left the community center, Amelia turned to Ethan. "I can't promise that I'll forgive you right now, but I see that you're trying. And that means something to me." Ethan didn't reply. He simply nodded, his eyes filled with hope. That night, as they stood together by the Christmas tree at the local church, Amelia, for the first time, allowed Ethan to take her hand, a small but meaningful gesture of a new beginning. The shimmering glow of thousands of Christmas lights spread across the city, Yet it wasn't enough to dispel the cold fog lingering between Ethan and Amelia. In a room adorned with wreaths and flickering candlelight, Ethan stood motionless, gripping a letter tightly in his hand. His eyes were heavy with despair and a deep, gnawing fear, the fear of losing the one person who had given his life meaning. Meanwhile, Amelia sat quietly, her composed expression masking emotions that ran deep. Her gaze, reflective and enigmatic, seemed to mirror the shared pain they both carried, an unspoken weight that neither could yet fully confront. Amelia had remained silent for so long, but tonight, that silence was shattered. Carter Hayes, Ethan's former friend, suddenly appeared at a charity event they were both attending. With a sinister smirk, Carter didn't hesitate to reveal the bed in front of the crowd, ripping apart the warm, festive atmosphere of Christmas Eve with his cutting words. "Amelia, you didn't know, did you?" Carter sneered triumphantly. This marriage was just a ridiculous game Ethan agreed to, a way to prove he could control anything and anyone. And now, you're nothing more than a pawn in his plan. Amelia froze, Carter's words stabbing into her heart like a dagger, reminding her of all the reasons she had despised Ethan. Her gaze shifted from Carter to Ethan, her tear-filled eyes brimming with both pain and profound disappointment. "Is it true, Ethan?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. Ethan stepped toward Amelia, his usual confidence stripped away, replaced by deep regret. "At first, yes," he admitted, his voice breaking. "But everything changed. Amelia, you changed me. I don't see you as part of a game anymore. You're the one person who's made me want to rebuild my life." Amelia let out a sharp, bitter laugh that echoed through the room. "Rebuild your life? Ethan, do you really think a few good deeds can erase everything? Do you think I can just forget that you once gambled on me as if I were nothing more than a prize?" Her words hit Ethan like a slap across the face. He stood silent, his arms falling helplessly to his sides, as if the weight of his past was crushing him. But then, he met her gaze directly, his voice trembling with raw emotion. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know that every single day, I'm trying to become a better person, not just for you, but for everything I've destroyed." That night, Ethan resolved to take a bolder step to prove his transformation. On Christmas Day, he held a public press conference where he openly admitted to all the mistakes of his past. He didn't just apologize to Amelia, but extended his apologies to the families who had been hurt by his real estate projects. Under the glow of hundreds of candles and in front of the watching crowd, Ethan announced his decision to abandon several major projects and pledged to use his resources to support the communities that had been impacted. Amelia sat quietly among the audience, observing him closely. She couldn't deny the weight of his words. They carried sincerity and purpose. Yet, in her heart, a question lingered. Was this genuine change, or just another calculated move? After the press conference, Ethan sought out Amelia in a small room behind the hall. She stood by the window, her gaze distant as she watched the sparkling Christmas lights outside. "I've done everything I can," Ethan said, his voice filled with sincerity. "But the one thing I can't do is make you believe in me. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I hope you'll give me the chance to prove that I've changed." Amelia turned to face him, her eyes brimming with tears, though her poise remained intact. "Ethan, do you know what the hardest part is? It's not forgiving you. It's forgiving myself for believing that you could be different." Ethan stepped closer, his hands trembling but not daring to reach for her. "I can't change the past, but I can change the future. And I hope you'll be a part of that future." Amelia was silent for a long moment. She looked at him, as though trying to see into the depths of his soul. Finally, she spoke, her voice slow and deliberate. "I don't know if I can fully trust you yet, but I'm willing to try. Not for you, but because I want to believe there can be something better in this life." As they stood together, The room seemed to grow still. A distant Christmas hymn began to play, its warm and gentle melody offering comfort for the pain both had endured. Ethan said nothing more. Instead, he quietly reached out and took Amelia's hand. That simple gesture, though small, held everything he wanted to convey: his sincerity, his hope, and his love. In the gentle glow of Christmas Eve, Amelia softly placed her hand over Ethan's. That moment was more than just forgiveness. It was a promise, a new beginning for both of them, built on sincerity, love, and hope. Ethan, once a cold-hearted man driven only by power, had discovered the true meaning of life through acts of kindness and compassion. And Amelia, with her strong and resilient heart, had learned to trust again, believing that old wounds could be healed by genuine love. Outside the window, snowflakes fell softly, and the shimmering lights of the Christmas tree seemed to offer a silent blessing for the couple. The city bustled on, but within them, a deep sense of peace had taken root. Did this inspiring journey move you? If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your emotions and reflections are the motivation behind every beautiful story we share. Like to spread this message of love and hope. Share this story with your friends and loved ones. Subscribe to Inspiring Hearts to never miss another heartfelt story. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Wishing you and your family a Christmas filled with love, joy, and happiness. See you in our next story.